Welcome to Jude, the podcast. This is David Jude. I'm your host for this, well, the whole series, the whole podcast. With me, as always, is Stacy. Glad to have you here. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you.
Yep. So we'll have a good time through this. A little different theme music. I kind of like a little change it up here.
A little more upbeat.
A little more upbeat, yeah, that I think will do well for us.
I'm waiting for you to flash around with a big magnifying glass at your eye.
Well, you never know. That may come before too awful long. Yeah, so we've had, since the show's been going, and I'll talk a little bit about my job as a private investigator and what I do, but we've had a lot of requests, a lot of asks to say, tell us more about, what you do, what the day in the life of a PI, just more about the job. So we thought we should start with a series of that. Just what does a private investigator do, and just I don't know, PI themed podcast. So we're going to start with that.
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions of PI people because the first thing you think of is the sleazy dude with the gun underneath his desk looking for cheating spouses, and so that doesn't really fit kind of what you do. And so when we talk about you being a PI, that's the first, everybody's like, oh, I bet you've got some steamy stuff, and maybe a little bit, but that's not the majority of what you do. So
it's not a lot of what we do, our company, but there's and we'll do another episode on that, right? Because we've done some of that work. We'll do that on a follow-up episode. But
and you're kind of branching out to where Eastern Kentucky, you have more services to offer out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting bigger with our access points, I guess.
But that is a, that cheating spouse thing. I don't want to just call it cheating spouse, but we can lump it into surveillance, I suppose.
Sure.
Well, now there's a couple different kinds of surveillance. Let's just talk. We can say cheating spouse. There's a decent sized network or opportunities for that. There's people that specialize in it. They do it great. But we've not done a whole lot of that work. We've done some of it. But we'll come back to that on another episode. What we thought we would start with today is criminal defense investigations. That's a lot of where our work comes from, and that's a lot of what we do, and it kind of fits into both of our work histories, and so it's kind of a natural fit for us as we get into this world, or have been in this world. Anyway, let's start with we'll start with some criminal defense investigation type of stories and see where that takes us for today.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it should be fun. We'll tell a few stories here in just a little bit. So the first thing we thought that we would want to explain to the listener is, why are criminal defense investigators important? Why is this role important? And before we get into that answer, I have to say in my previous careers, my previous life, I probably didn't appreciate what we're about to say. I know I didn't until we started doing it.
I know I didn't. I was the most, I would say, pro-biased police wife there is. And I still am. I mean, I still am, but it has opened my eyes to some deficits that are out there.
Yeah, still am.
I guess so.
And that's kind of the point, right? Is it's not just a police issue. It's a whole systemic issue of the criminal justice system. And where does this role fit into that, right?
Sure.
And there's some animosity. It always feels like, I'm joking with that, but there's some animosity between a criminal defense investigator and the law enforcement investigator, and there really doesn't need to be. In reality, you're working for the same goal.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, we'll cover that back.
There was a little bit of you're working for the other side. And I don't think necessarily that's true, because I think that's how you explained it to me. I think it was the very first case you got, was literally them saying, that we're here to make sure that everything's done properly, that they get a fair trial, or they get a fair investigation. That's all. And so it's not like you're trying to, have that moment of, I got him, or whatever. It's, it just seems like it's opened my eyes to a lot broader, proper defense.
Yeah, I've had two or three say, "Oh, now you're working for the dark side," or even had somebody say, "Oh, you're a traitor," And I thought, well, you're just saying that because you're stuck in that bias that I had too. You don't really understand what the job is and why it's important. And Anyway, we thought it'd be important to talk about that to start the show off. And I think you had found something that helps us with that.
Sure. I'm on the Google. So it talks about private investigations. It just refers to a generalized field of work conducted by licensed professionals known as PIs or private investigators or private detectives. They can be hired by individuals, businesses, or attorneys to gather information for evidence for legal proceedings or personal matters. So it's a big, huge umbrella to look at criminal versus personal versus whatever. So, and with that, you do a lot of the criminal as well as like the background checks. There's a lot of other stuff. I mean, but it's kind of like nursing. You can go into 100 different fields within this investigations. So
I always call it the blue sky theory. I think I've robbed that from somebody to say, you look at, or the windshield, you look out your windshield and you see this big blue sky and you try to define where a private investigator fits. And there's so many different places in this big, broad blue sky. Or when you look out the windshield, it fits in a lot of different places, including in this particular world.
Which is quite interesting.
Which is very interesting. So we also say all the time that the cases we have in our office are as interesting or more interesting than anything you see streaming on TV, and that's the truth. But to follow up with what you said, that what I guess I've come to find out, and what I've kind of I've always believed it, is the question when I get asked those things, right? What's it like, and how come you work for the people charged with the crime? Because it feels like society is hardwired to think, oh, that's a negative, that's a taboo, and it's not. And so I always come back to ask the two questions to say, well, let me ask you this first. Do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in those things that the Constitution gives us, the Bill of Rights and those things? And, you get a puzzled look sometimes like, well, yeah. Like, of course, we all do. At least I think we should, right?
I hope. I don't know these days.
I hope. And then I say, well, then if that's true, then that means the worst offender in any community, in our community, has constitutional rights. And at that point, usually, you see this connection going on like, well, yeah, I suppose they do.
I wonder if the audience, I had to get back on the Google, had to look it up, because I'll be honest with you, if you asked me what are my constitutional rights, I couldn't name them. I really couldn't. And when you look at it, it may reset everybody that's having such issues right now. As if you look at Amendment 1 through 8, there's more on there. But I mean, I'm looking at them and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what you deal in all the time. With the search and arrest, the criminal cases, right to a fair trial, rights in a civil case, bail, fines, and punishment.
Unlawful search and seizure, self-incrimination, right to a speedy trial.
But I've never really been exposed to those because I'm a good girl, so I think.
Right.
I've never really paid attention other than, what you're shoved down your throat or something. So
right.
Anyway.
And so I just say, that then if we believe in the Constitution, then that means the worst offender in our communities has constitutional rights. As hard as that is to accept, regardless of what they've been charged with or whatever crime is present on this particular case, the concept is if we're saying those constitutional rights are a given, then everybody has them and we have to protect them. So it's not to say that my clients are innocent or they're guilty or they're anything else. It's simply to say our job, and this is why I say that law enforcement is also doing the same job they're supposed to be anyway, which is protecting those constitutional rights. And so really this job as a criminal defense investigator is a checks and balances to ensure that both sides of this are defending those constitutional rights. It's a really interesting thing once you dig into what are you actually doing. I've had clients that have committed some really, really, really bad crimes. And it's not to say that they're innocent. And I'm not working to get them free of those charges. It's to say they do have rights. And what we're working towards is a fair path through the justice system.
That is completely different than the normal person's perception, because it for me, it was.
Yeah.
I always thought it was, what you see on TV or, your Perry Mason aha moments that they confess or whatever on the stand. But it's been eye-opening for me.
Mm-hmm. And the second thing I always come back after that initial discussion, I always come back to say, it's not TV, right?
Not at all.
And it's not us sitting at home watching the news or whatever we do and having conversations. You may think that this will never happen to you. But I have cases where it surprised those clients and those defendants too, that it has happened to them. And when something like this happens to them, then you're going to want somebody that defends the constitutional rights and all those things on your side, right? So
sure,
it does happen to folks, and you are going to realize these lessons at that point.
These amendments are very important.
Right. That's exactly right. All right. So that's the first set of questions that we have, and that's why this role is so important. And of course, we could go into, choosing who you pick, but we'll save that for another day. Let's get to some of the stories here in just a few minutes. That's the fun part of the episode. So then folks will come back and say, oh, that's a good point. I haven't thought of it from that perspective. And what's your role? I mean, what do you do? And I say, well, I've actually got a pretty easy role. I'm a fact investigator. That's what I do most of the time. My job is to go out and to review the case for accuracy. So whatever the government is going to use to prosecute the defendant, whatever the government is going to use is, in theory, turned over to the defense. So that the defense...
We need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Trigger.
Yeah.
Trigger alert.
Trigger alert. Yeah. That doesn't always happen, or it happens in very suspicious stages.
Just explain what's supposed to happen.
Yeah. In theory, it's called discovery. And whatever the government is going to use to prosecute the defendant is lumped into, just for a quick conversation today, it's lumped into what is called discovery. And discovery, because of that Constitution, those Bill of Rights, the defendant gets to know what's going to be used against them, right? You have the right to confront your accusers. And so, in theory, discovery is supposed to be turned over in full to the defense team. And then the defense team is able to go through the discovery. Gosh, we're going to squirrel a lot here. So
I think that's the book. The book term.
Yeah. So, some things take some time. For example, DNA, that doesn't happen within an hour like you see on TV. That could take months.
Toxicologies.
Year or year or more to get DNA, toxicology and ballistics and all these different tests that you see, those take time, right? And so the government can't turn those over up front because the testing's not been complete. And so, you get it in phases sometimes. And so this is what we have so far. And then as testing gets completed, the government will ship over, test results or whatever else they have. That's how it's supposed to play out. Now, sometimes it doesn't come very timely. Sometimes it doesn't come at all. And sometimes the attorneys have to argue over it in court to say, we're not getting discovery. And then my job as the fact investigator is to go through that and just to say, if you heard me a second ago, it's what the government is going to use to prosecute my client or my client, the defendant. That doesn't mean they have to turn everything over.
Which is nuts to me. That's insane.
Yeah. So
that's insane to me.
They may have some exculpatory evidence, which means my client, here's something that the government knows that could lead to my client being found not guilty. And so...
Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my part as the fact investigator. And this is where my previous career of experience comes into play, right? Sure. Is I can speak police and I can speak reports and all these things, and I can look for those things to say, where is this? And what about this? And then my job is to go out and, review the evidence and maybe document a scene or to just think about things in a different way, a different perspective to make sure that we're giving the defendant a fair path through the justice system. And I always say the facts will lead us where we need to go. I tell my clients that when I sit down with them, like, listen, I'm not here to accuse you. My job's not to defend you either. My job is to figure out the facts, and the facts will take us where we need to go. And so we go through it. And I always tell people to think of my job. We can easily relate to what a law enforcement detective, what a police detective is. That's ingrained into us, it seems. My job's no different. I just don't work for a police department anymore. I work privately, and I do it for the defense team. So really, I'm just a private detective doing similar type of work as what we think of.
So you're thinking about hiring a private investigator, huh? Think knowledge, experience, and trust. Think DPJ Consulting. Listen, we're the folks you want on your team. Whether it's a criminal matter, corporate, or administrative issue, or maybe something more personal, you need to make the right choice for you. Our house of expertise at DPJ Consulting can help you with investigations, and that can mean a whole lot of different things. Pre-employment background checks, personal VIP security, and so much more. Check us out at dpjconsulting.com. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, or give us a call at 855-TEAM-DPJ. That's 855-TEAM-DPJ. Give us a call. It costs nothing to talk. It costs you everything if we don't.
Right. And we're just talking about the criminal defense sides because you do it for all sides.
Sure.
I mean, you do it for, the prosecution as well as defense. And I think for me as a layperson, I had no idea because my career was nursing, and everything's very black and white to me. Very black and white.
Like an ominous chord there.
And I was like, whoa. Yeah. Very black and white. And so I just assumed, because like in nursing, if it's not documented, it wasn't done. Or if it wasn't this, it wasn't done. I think I was most taken back at some of your cases is where, your knowledge knows that you're missing reports, or like we'll have whatever in discovery and you're missing items that I would not know as a nurse, or if I did not have previous law enforcement experience, that there should be this type of form for whatever. And the attorneys probably know that, but a lot of times they're so bogged down, they don't have time to do the busy work. That's what their assistants are and things like that. But I think what really shocked me the most about the work that you're doing is I just assumed it was best man wins. Like, here's all the crap I have on your client. Good luck in court defending that. And that's not what is happening. Like, not at all. Like, I am so taken back by that because that's my interpretation of a fair or a justice system that's fair is here's all the evidence. Good luck trying to, explain it away. So you hire your people, I'll hire my people to see in court. Kind of like a gunslinger. I mean, that's how I felt it really was until you started.
Like a good old competition.
Yeah, like I'll beat you because I can research better than you, or whatever. Right. And it's not that way. And so sometimes there's strategic, like you said, people immediately want to go to toxicology. They may have already charged the client because of what the crime was, but yet we still don't even have toxicology back on both parties or things like that. So to me, it was a whole lot more muddy than I just assumed because I'm very susceptible to what you're told on TV or in the shows or, because I love those whodunits and things like that. But yeah, it's a whole different, I had no idea until you started getting into this and we both started doing stuff.
I don't think I appreciated that either. From the law enforcement side, I would work my cases and I would turn them in and I would just go about to the next one, right? You move on to the next day. And, some officers are really concerned about how their cases go through court system, and that's great. I'm not saying right or wrong or indifferent. For me, I really didn't, right? I thought my job was completed once I investigated whatever I did, and I did my part, and then I moved on. And so I really didn't appreciate the fact that it's not just a straight up competition. Here's my team, and there's your team, and let's battle it out on the field, and may the best team win. But there's definitely a lot of strategy that is put into these things, and you see it from all sides. You see it from the court side, you see it from the law enforcement side, the prosecutor side, the defense team side. You see all these people strategizing. Political side. So there's a lot happening inside of these criminal defense cases, and it's not just my team versus your team and let the best team win in court.
I was so shocked by that. Yeah, I guess I was just really naive. I had no idea.
Well, it's not naive. I think society is ingrained to believe that's how it happens. And in theory, that is how it happens. In theory, it is. Here's everything, and here's what we're going to do. And you're going to come back and say everything against that. But there's also a lot of gamesmanship and strategy that's happening inside of those cases. So that's been really shocking to learn and be a part of. Yeah. And so before we get into some of that strategy, let's talk about what a legal team is from the criminal defense side. So you may have one attorney representing the client. You may have a team full of attorneys, just depending on the case, the nature of the crime, experience level of the attorneys. There's a whole lot of factors that go into that. So sometimes you may have a team full of attorneys. And in that case, you would have like in band, you'd have a first chair, second chair type of thing, but you have a leader of the team and then you have attorneys. And then oftentimes they will, for my role as a fact investigator, they'll bring on a fact investigator. And as we've talked about, that person's role is to review all this stuff and what facts do we not know, And let me say this too. From the defense side, the defense team wants to know bad facts also. We're also interested in what bad things can you find out about the case. Maybe the police didn't say these things, but that's super important to know too, right? So that you have a good understanding of when the case goes to court. There's also a role called a mitigation specialist. The way that I kind of describe them is their job is to help define the defendant as a person. And so if the defendant is found guilty and then you move into the sentencing phase of the trial, then the defense teams typically want the defendant to be humanized and to be seen as a person. And I'm probably not saying that right, but their job is to make sure that the person is seen for who they actually are, not perhaps just the crime that they've been charged with or found guilty with. And so the fact investigation...
Give a human side to the monster.
There's a human side. That's right. So
that deserves a fair trial.
Yeah. So if we're talking about, let's stick with that. If we're talking about the concept of even the worst offender in our communities deserve a fair path through the criminal justice system, then that person needs to be seen as a human and who they are, or maybe to give some explanation about who they are and what that looks like. So that mitigation specialist plays a really big role. You think of things like getting into school records and school performance and medical records, and are there some other underlying things that have
abuse in their family history,
fetal alcohol syndrome, all these different things that may have existed in this client's life prior to this. And whether you support it or not, I almost feel like I can feel it coming back at me through the airwaves.
Oh, yeah.
But this is the job. So whether you support it or not, those things get brought into causation, I guess maybe the word to say. That's probably not the right word there.
No, but it's contributing factors.
Contributing factors.
What I would say. But it's also, it's clear that when you look at a lot of these cases and these I guess, people that evaluate them, there's usually some common links. One of them is absence of father figure or something like that. Yep. So that there's tends to be a trend of, I'm not saying just because you don't have a dad, you're going to be a psychopath, but it just seems like there's some very similar characteristics with their history, I think, when it comes to that.
Yeah. And so, the people that may be the haters of what we just said will come back and say, I don't think that's fair and accurate, or maybe that shouldn't have a place there. But it is, because the Bill of Rights also talks about excessive bail and excessive punishment. And so it's buried in there somewhere. I can't tell you exactly where it's at. I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying it's in there too. And so the whole part of the justice system is to make it fair, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to opine on the fact, can a judge sentence you to 1,000 years? Is that fair or not? I don't know. Every case is unique, and I'm just saying all of these little moving parts.
That's not your role.
Have a place. That's exactly right.
It's not our role.
So that's the makeup of a legal team, and you're moving us on to a good place here. The role, like what is the strategy?
Yeah.
And then kind of a new role, a lot of the attorneys will have legal nurse consultants on staff at times too. And that ranges from, criminal to even medical mal. And so I'm in a limited manner work with the team as well, that if they're looking for any type of education regarding any of the medical issues, then I will step in and participate. But most of the time, it's only if I'm kind of consulted or given permission to do so. So that's my disclaimer.
We'll tell a story here in a little bit about how Stacy and her role has been very helpful on a criminal defense case. We'll come back on another show, maybe and do some nurse consulting type pieces. Sure. But you've helped out quite a bit on the criminal defense side. I think it's a key piece for us. So we'll come back to that. The other thing before we get into a couple stories is strategy. And so I always say too, I'm in a good position, right? Because I'm not the decision maker in a lot of these things. I can control my own company, my own team, but
as long as you have cell service.
Yeah, that's true. But
foreshadowing there.
Yeah. My job's as the fact investigator is to go out and gather the facts, and then I turn over everything to the attorneys, who are they're the main chair, they're the boss of the case, and they're the ones that have to stand up in court and make a defense. And so, while we are active in helping to develop strategy, we're not all the ones creating the strategy. So, we're not an attorney. And so, or I'm not an attorney.
No, we cannot. We do not.
So we don't give legal advice, and we don't get into those things. But if you have a good, effective legal team, then everybody that's part of the team has a voice within the team to say, from my perspective, this is what I think. The mitigation specialist may say, from my perspective, this is what I think. And you have that dialogue. That's very productive. So it's good.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought to talk about some of the strategy. Let's talk about a couple different, maybe dilemmas and things that it took for me or us to learn about some particular cases. And so we'll tell some stories that help guide the strategy and start getting you into what the end result of some of these cases are, because we could talk for a long time about some of this stuff. So the first one was a father-son homicide. And it's where super tragic. I will always remember this case. And I could do hours of talking about this case. And maybe we come back and focus on it at some point in time. But the father was charged with murder for murdering his son. From our point of view, I do not believe that's the case. I don't think it is. It didn't then. I don't now. I don't think I will ever come back unless that particular client would ever come back to me and say, yeah, David, this is, whatever. But I just don't think that was the case. I think it was self-defense. I think it was a clear case of self-defense. And that kind of sets up the case without getting deep into the specifics of it. The evidence part of what I want to talk about here is, in this particular case, we don't believe, I'm certain of, the police did not recover the weapon that was used.
How does that happen? How does somebody get charged with murder and you don't have a weapon?
Yeah. They found other weapons inside the house, and they concluded that one of those weapons must have done it. And so you, the listener, say, yeah, but on CSI and all these shows, don't you have DNA and testing and all these other things? And yes, we do and did.
And they showed nothing.
And they showed nothing.
Nothing.
And so in conversation with my client on this, he said, yeah, this is what happened. This is what my son did after the knife wound went in during their fight, physical fight. And my son pulled the knife out of his body and threw the knife into a wood line, into a hidden area. For me, coming from the law enforcement side, I was like, holy crap, we need that knife. And so I ran that by the legal team. the attorneys to say, holy moly, hot off the press. Here it is. The police don't have the knife. Do you want me to go find that knife? And this was shocking to me. The legal team said, no, we don't want you to do that. And I'll let you pause for a second to process that, because if you've not worked in this world, that's hard to understand. Wouldn't you want the police or wouldn't you want to recover that knife? And that's exactly what it's a very good legal team. But this particular time, the attorney I still love to this day. I think she's just a wonderful, wonderful person. And she's like, no, we don't want to find that knife because the government has failed to find the knife. The government now is charging our client, and we know
they don't have the weapon.
They don't have the weapon. Now, I'm sitting here with wide eyes and open mouth, and I've lived this for several years now, and I don't know if you guys are appreciating this or not, but that's a huge statement. Second part to that is from the defense side, maybe our client did it, and this is early on, so you really didn't know at this point, but maybe our client did it, so therefore we don't want to go out and find evidence to incriminate our client. It's on the government
to prove that. Yes.
To prove it. The government has the burden of proof in these criminal cases, not the defense team. And so and it still is very difficult to talk about, to put that into the right context to make it make sense, because sometimes it doesn't. But the government has the proof, and they did all this case and still don't have the knife in this particular case. And so that was really, really hard for me to understand. Like, you don't want me to go find the knife? Like, absolutely not.
Because we want the truth.
Because
we want the truth, but the truth may make your client go to jail forever.
Right.
So, I don't know. Like, for me, that's still, I'm not saying a white lie, but it's just evasive. So it's an integrity thing for me.
It's a strategy.
But I get it. I mean, I get it now, but I just was like, I don't know.
We are so glad to have Ugly Tint as a sponsor to the show. My longtime friend Kenny Dietrich is a subject matter expert in modern survival, bushcrafting, and preparedness. As he challenges us on the show, be prepared for the disaster most likely to happen to you. But let me tell you, Ugly Tint is so much more than just disaster preparedness. You need to check out the website at uglytent.com. That's UGLYTENT.com for a complete list of their products, their classes, and all the services that Kenny offers. There's a lot that I think you'll find interesting at uglytent.com. Again, just a neat place to go. So whether it's for camping, maybe it's a hike, maybe it's just trying to be in the outdoors for a little bit, uglytent.com is filled with the products and the services that you want. Not to mention, you have a true expert as a resource for you. Listen, while you're there, use the promo code JUDE, that's lowercase JUDE, and that code will get you 10% off your total purchase. That's a pretty good deal for some really cool stuff. Anyway, check out Kenny at uglytent.com.
And so then you get into a whole lot of other spinoffs, right? To say, well, the son's DNA and fingerprints are going to be on it. It's also possible that our client's DNA and fingerprints are going to be on it. That doesn't mean he used the knife to intentionally commit murder. Maybe he just grabbed the knife to look at it. And so now suddenly you've got, you would have physical evidence that the government could use against our client.
Sure.
When he legitimately possessed the knife at some point. So,
well, it was in the house. I mean, it was
in the house
for everybody.
It was for everybody. So just put you in this weird spot to say, okay. And what I like to do is like, all right, let's stop for a second. Now talk to me why this is important, because from my previous career, I'm going in the woods and I'm going to spend whatever time we need to find this knife. And they're like, exactly. And they didn't. Yet they still charged the client. And here we still are. So we don't want to go find evidence. It's up to the government to do that, and they failed to do it.
Which is a great strategy.
It's a great strategy.
That would have been the first thing I would have rolled on and been like, you didn't even find the weapon.
You did it. You didn't have the weapon.
You don't have the weapon. How can this be?
And yet, in that particular case, the police remained adamant that they did, despite the negative tests and things coming back, for blood and all the other stuff that they were searching for.
We'll talk about a little bit of the bias that may have set the tone for the charge.
Yeah,
that was an interesting case.
Yeah, I keep I'm threatening to write a book or make a class or do something on the bias that happens, like with dispatcher bias and how law enforcement
not
interprets
that we're saying dispatchers are all biased.
Not
it's
at
just
all.
Their interpretation is a real time chaos, craziness. And so that's how easily this could have happened. So, like I said, we're not putting words. We don't have an opinion about dispatchers. They rock, but that's a lot of there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Great point.
Yeah, you're gonna have the hate
from that side of things. Let me tell you, I have so much respect for telecommunicators, dispatchers, whatever term we're going to give them. They oftentimes have no closure, limited information. And you want to talk about dealing with crap when the 911 line rings, those folks are dealing with a lot of stuff really fast. They're truly amazing professionals. And so there's oftentimes have no closure for what happens later. So they're left with this big void of, it's what a critical, traumatic incident they lived over the phone with this family. And then get no closure in the back end. To me, it's just a horrible part of their job. It is.
I
really
think it would be a big bunch of burnout.
Yeah.
With that.
So in this particular case, someone from inside the home called 911 to get help for the son, and at some point, you can imagine that the dispatcher, the telecommunicator, is taking this 911 call. Taking in all this information in a chaotic, heated moment.
It was domestic.
Yeah, right.
Domestic,
Comes in,
obviously.
Right.
Chaos.
Screaming, the whole 9 yards. You've heard these on TV. At the same time, the dispatcher is then immediately dispatching whoever, police, fire, whatever, to the scene. And so their job is to take the information and turn it back over to whoever's going to be responding to this. And so in this particular call, I don't remember exactly the quotes, so I'll be careful of what I say here. But in this particular call, the dispatcher's words were of a criminal act. For example, I'm making this up just so I can stay, because I don't know exactly what was said here, but the father has assaulted the son. Or the father has stabbed the son.
Instead of just saying it was a stabbing.
Instead of just saying the son has sustained these injuries, the son has this whatever. And again, this isn't to pass judgment. It's just to say that comment was made. That comment then comes to the police officer or the fire department who are responding, and they now see that incident as something completely different than maybe it was. Other than an accidental stabbing, which is what ultimately our team would say that it was. It was an accidental. It was just a really unfortunate, horrific, horrible event. And so it takes that officer's perspective and now turns it into a criminal event. And so they're heightened in their response, and they're already starting down this path of, I have a criminal investigation happening. And so that's important here too, right? As you go back and you review the cases and you start thinking, well, what was the dispatch? What does the 911 call sound like? What do they even know? What were the police officers' perceptions as they rolled into this thing? And then, how did that impact the rest of the case? So this particular one's super interesting to me. And again, we could talk for a long time on that particular one. And we'll come back on another episode and talk about, do you take a plea deal?
Oh.
Or do you not take a plea deal? And I think I've mentioned this on a previous episode, but we'll come back and
I think they need closure on this case. But.
Oh, I will. The father ended up taking a plea deal, and he pled guilty. And so we can come back on another episode and dig into it.
It's so sad.
And so what happens is that ultimately in these cases, depending on the strength of the case and all these different variables that you can just imagine, the government will come back and you'll have an opportunity to either mediate or to plea or to whatever. And in this particular case, the client chose to take a plea deal. And the way that it works is we can give you this low number where you have the potential to get on parole and go home in a reduced time, a couple of years, let's just say. Or you can take it to court and go to trial. And if you're found guilty, it'll be 50 years or more. And so this particular client was a little bit older, had some health issues. And so, a 50-year conviction is a life sentence to him. And so he's faced with this. What do you do? And at any rate, he chose the plea deal. And I remember sitting in mediation, and I maybe I overstepped my bounds, but I had a good relationship with a different attorney who was on the case at this time. And our client said, I'll take it. And I said, hang on a second. Hold up before you say that. And again, I was kind of out of line here because it's not my place to have that conversation. I was like, you sure you want to do that? You have a great case here. And he said, David, yeah, I do. I do, because I'm afraid of the other part. Man, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, heartbreaking.
Well, and what I didn't realize with any of these cases that you've had is by the time you've gotten consulted to work on them, they may have already been in jail 2 years.
Yeah, great point.
So there was already time served, which when you were, it stood out to me when you're like, oh, you may go home in a couple of years for killing somebody. No, that's not really how it works. Is they've already been incarcerated for quite some time waiting to go to trial. And so that was another big shocker for me, is to realize that, you have the right to a fair and speedy trial. And we have seen several cases of incarcerated individuals years prior to their trial. That it's mind-blowing to me, because I've seen stuff, the high-profile cases are funny because they move along in the court system very quickly.
Some do, yeah.
Then we had some hit during COVID. So then that put a stop to everything. And so it's unbelievable to me that, so the plea deal would be a smaller reduced sentence. You probably could get out in 6 months because you've already served 2 or 3 years. Yeah. It's nuts.
By the time that, in this case, I think by the time that he entered his guilty plea, it was a reduced charge, but by the time he had entered the guilty plea, he had already been in a year and a half or something like that. And, in theory, mathematically, he didn't have much longer to serve. Now, he did have a little bit left to serve.
now?
Should be.
Oh.
Yeah, should be. So, there's all this conversation of saying, well, I wouldn't take a plea deal. If you didn't do it, you didn't do it. That's not how it works. That's just not how it works.
It's a big eye opener.
It's a big eye opener. So that was one story of kind of a strategy, ethical dilemma to find ourselves in. But as you start to do the work, you see these things come up. Let's move over to, what about the shotgun shell? Want to talk about that one?
That's your ethical dilemma, as long as you have cell service.
Yeah. So this is another murder case, and pretty complicated. The first one that I told you about, I have a lot of sympathy there for our client, for our defendant, because I truly believed it was just a tragic fight that just happened, and it shouldn't have happened, and it's just a tragic incident. And so there's some empathy and sympathy that comes into play at that point. This next case is a murder, a real murder, and for whatever it is. And again, we're going to not get too deep into the specific details of it. But one thing that I like to do is I like to see the scene if I can, right? Beyond the law enforcement taking photographs and whatever videos you get. Gosh, we could talk hours about that
with
too.
Shoes in every photo.
Yeah, with shoes and the whole 9 yards.
If you know, you know. I guess.
Yeah, if you know, you know. And so this particular case was in one of the most rural parts of Kentucky. And I would joke, if you were going to dump a body somewhere, this is exactly where you would do it. And so you just can't get there from here. It's just one of those places. And so as the fact investigator on the case, I thought, I want to see the scene. You can read it and you can see it in pictures, but there's just something that just doesn't make sense sometimes. And sometimes you just need to see it. At least I do. And so in this particular case, we loaded up a whole team.
Well, you subcontracted geography people that could read GPS to get you where you need to be.
Yeah, back to our friend Kenny with Ugly Tent.
It was that bad.
Yeah. Kenny with Ugly Tent, and he's on the previous episodes, and just a great friend of ours. But, he would stop short of calling himself a land navigation expert. But to me, he is. Now, he's going to say something different. But at any rate, we contracted him to say, I have some GPS coordinates of where this scene happened, and I want you to take me to these GPS coordinates. Not close, not in the area. That's the task. You're going to take me to these coordinates. And he said, okay, let's go. And because of the area, we had a whole team. We had somebody driving a vehicle up around the ridge tops. We had portable radios with us. Kenny's job was to march me to the coordinates. My job was to document the scene. And I had somebody else there as rear guard.
Yeah.
Because we were on fire roads.
Meth guard.
Well, you just don't know what you're going to run into.
Well, they knew you were there. Don't you worry.
Don't you worry. Yeah. So it was one of those areas where we took extra precautions to say, we're going to take the whole team, and this is the goal, and here we go. And so we did. We had an armed rear guard that anytime we stopped, his job was to make sure that we're okay. And then we just marched on. Now, the foreshadowing is the radios didn't work. They were out of range. Of course, there's no cell service. So, I don't know the sound.
I'm feeling some Starlink for the car coming on from now on.
Yeah, some personal Starlink.
Starlink.
Put on top of a ball cap or something and walk somewhere. That's actually a great idea. But the fun part here is I remember Kenny turning to me and say, hey, we're pretty close. And he had some type of computer gadget that he was working on. And again, I'm paraphrasing. Hey, we're pretty close. I said, that's not what I want. That's not the standard. The standard is take me to those coordinates. Whatever we got to do, we're going to those coordinates. He said, okay. And so we marched on a little bit further, and he looked down at his watch. He's like, David, we're here.
Down the cliff.
I was like, okay. And it's real thick brush. You can imagine a fire road back up just into the mountains of southeastern Kentucky. It's just a fire road, and it's not even defined. It's just a grown over path, basically. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we're here. And I'll be daggone if I didn't turn to my right, and almost an arm's length away was an evidence flag that the state police had put up at that scene. So, that's kind of fun in a way, right? Because Kenny took us to the exact scene. Now, there's some other stuff to that. That means law enforcement had to actually use the GPS at the scene, which sometimes doesn't happen. Sometimes you forget. You can't march a mile and a half back up in the mountains, so you just take it at the grocery store, somewhere close, right? But as we talked about a minute ago, my job reviewing the case and the accuracy of what the law enforcement is saying, that's part of it.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, if they forgot to take the GPS coordinates, then they're not going to march back up there. They're going to stop when they get their pop and chips down at the bottom of the hill. Oh, crap, let me take them now. Well, that'd have been way off, right? Mm-hmm. So the cool part is it verified we're at the right spot, and I'm not kidding. I can remember it sitting here. As I look to my right, and I've got a picture of it over there for our office, but as I look to my right, there's the evidence flag. Well, that's exciting. Like, holy crap, man, you did it. That's awesome. You got us right where we're supposed to go. And it was one of those moments like, well, now what? Like, I don't know. I don't know, but I'm going to photograph it and video it from multiple different perspectives. It was a steep hillside, probably dropped off 20, 25 feet down a hillside or something like that.
Enough to dump a body.
If you were going to dump a body and do what they did in this particular crime or alleged to have done. which was to commit the murder up on the fire road and then push the body over the hill. This is where you would do it. And so once you're there, it makes sense. Reading it, not so much. So I thought, okay, well, let me document it and just photograph it and video it so that the rest of the legal team can make sense of it. So part of that was I was going to go down the hill and photograph it back up because I could show the perspective of how steep the hillside was. Well, as I slid down the hillside, because that's how steep it was, and you're grabbing trees and anything you can do to prevent yourself from just rolling down the hill.
You dropped your glasses, didn't you?
Yeah, I lost my glasses. Got them on top of my head. Yeah, thanks for remembering that.
Yeah, you had your
trying to think about
glasses.
that. Did my thing, right? Went on to photograph some other stuff. And one of the folks there I had radio to them because the radios would work for us close, but it wouldn't work to our vehicle up on top of the ridge top. And I said, hey, man, I've lost my glasses. Can one of you go look and find them? And when they did, we found a 12-gauge shotgun shell. So there now becomes this conundrum of what do you do with this 12-gauge shotgun shell? So keep in mind the phones weren't working. I couldn't call the
legal team.
The legal team to say, there's also no guarantee that this 12-gauge shell was used in the crime. It was a 12-gauge shotgun that was used. We are at the exact coordinates of where this happened. But, we saw other evidence that hunting happens through here.
Area.
It's a hunting area. And so there's enough of a thing to say, I don't know what to do with that. And so you get in those predicaments where you say, I'm not exactly sure what to do with it.
And this one was before your other one with the knife, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
This was like your first true dilemma of like,
It was, it was somewhere near the beginning. And so I said, well, then I've got to rely back on my training and experience. And my training and experience says I'm going to collect it. Even through my private investigator licensure testing and research and trainings and all those things, it's a piece of evidence. Whether it's related or not, I don't know. But I'm going to collect it. And so I did. And then for the legal team, I'll say fortunately, I don't know if that's the right word here, but there were at least 2 attorneys on this particular case. And they had a disagreement over should I have collected that or not. And finally, one of them said, yeah, you got to collect it. So if it's related, it's related. If it's not, it's not. But that's not for us to say. We'll turn it over to the state police and they can test it or not. And so it's just a weird thing, right? To say, man, I'm in this really remote spot of Kentucky that you just can't get there from here. And you
couldn't call anybody.
And I couldn't call anybody.
So you not until you got back in cell service. So you made that decision and then let them know.
Yeah, right then.
That was a little tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you wouldn't do that normally. You would call and ask what they want or things like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it just made it tough.
It was tough. So now to close that one out, we did turn it over to the state police. And it was early because that was one of the first times they knew that I was working on. On
surprise
criminal defense stuff. And so, I ended up calling them to say, hey, by the way, I was documenting your scene and I found this shotgun shell. And it's this moment of,
what?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've collected the shell. Do you want it? Well, they're in a position they can't say no to that, right? Because the government has to come take it. And they did. They came.
It was so awkward though, because it's guys that you worked with, that you knew, and they're like looking at you, thinking, "What?"
Yeah,
that was weird.
Yeah. So in the end, I wish I would have gotten that shell back. I'd love to have that for the office. They didn't test it.
Yeah, they didn't test it.
It was in pretty bad shape by the time that we got there. Again, quite a bit of time had elapsed. It was rusted, and I don't know if there's any physical evidence they could have gotten from it. But it was still fun to get in it.
Oh, it just the look on the both, because I was stepped outside when you were trying to talk to him, because he wanted to come and get it. We were going to take it to the post, and for chain of command, he wanted to come and get it. And it was just so awkward seeing the two of you standing there, because he's just like, huh. And you're like, Good seeing you, man.
Here it is. Yeah.
Okay. See you later. It was so awkward.
Yeah.
Then that's when it's spread like wildfire.
Yeah. So they end up not testing the shell. And then I think that client ended up taking another plea deal or was found guilty of the crime and got a sentence. So they didn't need it for the rest of their case. And still, I don't know that it was related. So anyway, that was kind of fun. Okay. You want to do one more story or? Okay. Let's see. Let's take, we can get into one more story here in just a second. Let's do a story where you were involved. I think that would be, we can tie in a little bit about how.
Well, I've been involved in a lot of them, but just this one I felt like I was a big focus.
Yes, yeah. It certainly will. So we use our nurse consultant to, especially in criminal defense cases, there are cases that you just need to understand injury patterns. I think that's the best way to say it. Like this injury happened. Help me make sense of what happened to the human body in this thing. In this particular case, ironically, it was another son-father homicide where the son killed the father. And I'm going to turn it over to Stacey here in a second to get more from your point of view, but the government in this case played it out to be an execution. Multiple gunshot wounds. For lack of a better term, because we're not talking specifics about the case, but it's almost as if our client, the son who was charged with murder, emptied a magazine on his dad. And
over top of him. Execution style. That's offensive, right? To the society. I'm just saying that's an offensive thing to hear and to put out there into the community, but that's what the government's position was, is that this was standing over top of him and executed his dad. So in this case, again, I like to visit the scene. I like to have an understanding. I want to see things. I want to see them for myself because the police reports, while maybe accurate, aren't in their own way because they paint their own picture. And so if possible, I like to see the scene. In this case, I did. And I wouldn't say they paint their own picture. I would think of what their perception was. Like that sounds embellished. It's not embellished. It's their perception of the scene. Yeah. They document it the way they see it. Other people can see it a different way. That's what I mean.
That's a great way to come back and clarify that. I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Because you would never insinuate something like that.
Yeah, correct. That's right. Okay. That's right. And my words did kind of imply that they made up their own story.
They paint the motive, and as they document the report, no, that's not true.
That's not. No. That's not it. Right.
Like, we gotta fix that.
Right. But anyway, when I went to the scene, and to that point, I read from the police report where different folks involved here were allegedly standing. And so I did have that information to say, okay, well, if the shooting happened here, but yet our defendant ended up over here where he could be seen by somebody else, what's that look like? How does that happen?
Reconstruction.
Like a reconstruction, right? Well, here's how we used our nurse consultant. We have in our office a mannequin. We call him Manny, the mannequin. Manny, the crime scene mannequin.
Manny has scared the crap out of me multiple times.
He's nearly life-sized, I would say. Mm-hmm. Posable, but he's made up of fabric where you can, what we use him for is we have basically trajectory rods or an ability to plot points on him. And so
like this big giant voodoo doll.
Yeah, he's a big Manny, the big giant voodoo doll.
He's even wearing a Stevie Ray Vaughan hat over there
and a Skid Row shirt.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't understand medical records very well, and so we have those things. We have the medical examiner's report and a variety of different things to help say this is where the bullets entered the dead guy.
And pictures.
And pictures.
Of the dead guy.
That's right. So how does a nurse consultant come into play is I'm able to say,
Stacy, can you cipher this out for me? And you did.
It was a pretty heavy case. There were it was a clip, multiple gunshot wounds.
12 or 14?
14.
Something like that.
11 hit. Well, 11.
Something like that.
I think 11 hit, 14 were completely fired.
And so let's stop there for a second, because that's a lot. And when that comes in front of the jury, so our legal team strategy is to say, how are we going to defend?
Like, that's execution. I mean, those were my first words,
right?
I think, was like, oh my God, you're never going to.
And I can come back to say, well,
that's execution.
In a whole career's worth of law enforcement training, you shoot until the threat is stopped. It's not one shot, two shots. Is you fire your weapon until the threat is stopped, whatever that means. Sometimes all 3 magazines.
But I don't have that training. So to me, that is excessive.
Correct. And there's where the value of a criminal defense, a seasoned, appropriate criminal defense investigator, and we always say choose knowledge, experience, and trust, can come back and say, why is it good to argue that over here? We should be able to apply the same standards over here. As a matter of fact, the same prosecutor, not this particular one, but a prosecutor is equally going to apply those 2 standards. If law enforcement's involved in a shooting and they have to fire 23 rounds, they're going to say, well, it didn't take 24 and it took more than 22. So why can we not apply that in the criminal defense world to say, maybe it took 12, 13, 14 rounds to stop the threat? That's a new way of thinking for these legal teams, right? Because on the surface, that many rounds is
awful.
Like
that's a conviction.
Yeah.
Done.
And we did some fun stuff with Manny on this case. We left him put together
for quite a while, actually.
Yeah. And had people that would stop by the office like, what do you think of that? Oh my God, he got executed. No,
you're wrong.
You're wrong. It's self-defense. We're like, okay. So that was kind of our jury research pool to say, well, let me now throw this theory at you. Yeah. Well, kind of makes sense. Okay, that's good for us, right? That's research. So as for bias, I think we have it too. Of course, we're humans and we have our previous careers, but your bias was to plot each point.
Yeah. So my role was only to look at the autopsy reports and compare with the pictures, because sometimes, and I'm very OCD and very anal. So like to me, the smoking gun is if, in the medical world, people tend to love to label things wrong. So if they say your right arm, is it the patient's right arm or the right hand side? Which is it? Because those are 2 different things. And so when I'm looking at the report, I'm seeing inconsistencies with measurements, with certain anatomical things, which I have found in the judicial world, they really won't question or go after medical people. Like, they highly respect them. Me being the most critical, I'd be like, aha, your measurements are wrong. You're saying the wrong thing, But I plotted those points on him and it told a story. So when you looked at the trajectory rods, 11 of the 14 went in completely different ways. So with that, my job's done and I'm just looking at it going, what in the world? And David then takes that information that, I literally looked at the report. If it, was 2 inches from the iliac crest, that's where I plotted my point in the direction of travel, blah, blah, blah. I did all that and then turned that back over to him to where he and the legal team could look at that. And when they came, I don't know what happened there because I wasn't part of that, but it changed their perspective of what we were up against.
So on Manny, we rigged some basic trajectory rods, which are long pieces like a straw. I think you had a straw with
straws at first
with the stick pin, and we color coded those, and then we charted those. Like number 1 would be the medical examiner's number 1, so that we could correspond.
Which to me was huge because, like, if the medical examiner said bullet number 1 was a blow to the head, then you wouldn't have had bullet number 14. Like, no offense.
Important to understand that for the potential jury members listening, because medical examiner evidence item number 1 doesn't necessarily mean the first shot fired.
Correct. That is literally him going from the wound number 1, superior to inferior, anterior, posterior, anatomically, not shot number 1. And so you saw inconsistencies with shot number 1 was a blow to the head. Well, if that's the case, the the deceased would have been dead, down. There would have been no further bullets. So that's very important because as a juror, I would have never understood the difference.
So we had to come back as part of our job is to say, we don't know what order these shots
we have no idea.
Now, we could take what you did and probably get close.
Figure it out.
But it's not to say that medical examiner number one is shot number one.
Correct.
We don't know.
Correct.
You don't know that.
I mean, we knew that like 3 of the 11 were fatal shots, and that's per the medical examiner, not me. But you would know that. And so that was a lot of my job was to explain, well, if you hit the aorta, this is what's happening. If you hit the lung, this is what's happening. So
right. And so we've had a couple of those cases, right, that we could go on about. But on this particular one, we also found evidence where some of the shots missed, and we were able to track those, both by law enforcement investigation and our own from being there to say, here's a shot that never hit the body. What we're getting at is what we found when we did that trajectory is, as Stacy said, it starts to tell a story. And the trajectories are all over the place. They're like going
in a spinning circle.
In a spinning circle around Manny, the crime scene mannequin. Not all one direction from basically one place, execution style.
Correct.
And so when you see that, and I'm visual, so when I see that, it tells me he didn't stand over top of his dad and just repeatedly pull the trigger. There's something else happening because the body is rotating. There's movement. Otherwise, all of those trajectory points would have kind of been in the same direction. And in this one, they were
everywhere.
Completely
you could tell that a shot must have spun him at some point. Because you had entrance wounds from the front of his body. You had entrance wounds coming from the back of his body, and then lateral.
Top of the head.
Not even. Like if you were like, I think that was because he bent over and got shot again. Like it was just really weird trajectories.
So you're able to take that and then put with our client's version of events. And he told his story. And so part of what we're looking at is he telling us the truth or not, because you don't know. Some clients do, some clients don't. And so he told his version of the story, and we're at least able at that point to say, you know what, this is plausible. And he gave his version of what his dad's actions were and what he felt and when he started firing and where he ended up at for probably his final shot. And so you're able to take that story and then look at the trajectory and say, that kind of makes sense. As the body was progressing forward, he gets hit, he gets shot. What would happen if you got shot in the leg? Well, you would start to fall. You would start to turn. Oh, hang on. That takes us to Medical Examiner Exhibit 7. Maybe not in order, but you start to see that rotation of the body, and suddenly these wounds make sense. And so you're able to put together a story for the defense team to say, it's not execution style. I don't believe that at all. Now, you can argue whether it's a crime or not, whether it's self-defense or not, but it's not what the government is saying. I don't believe that.
We definitely disagreed on the intent versus self-defense, but it wasn't, I think, outright execution style.
No, it wasn't. It showed a lot of movement, and that wasn't explored by law enforcement. And so as we kind of close out this session to say, why is this role important? Because you're starting to manage better outcomes for the client, appropriate outcomes for the client, a fair path for the client to say, without this work, then it would have been presented as he simply executed his dad, stood over top of him, which...
Well, they went for the death penalty.
Yeah, which was kind of the words. That's my words, but that's what they're saying. Stood over top of him and point blank executed him. And that's not what happened. And so without our work, then that defendant would have none of that representation to say that's not what happened. At any rate, you get the idea that there is a place and it is important for this role. Some closure on that particular case. Again, that client was presented with a much better option than the death penalty. And a much reduced plea deal, I guess I'm trying to say. And so he took it. He took the plea deal, and that's a victory, right? It feels like a more fair path. Let me touch on that fair path one last time before we close.
He really didn't deny that he didn't shoot his dad. So
no,
the layman would be like, how are you going to excuse 14 shots or 16 or whatever it was he had? Well, he would never argue that he didn't shoot him. It was just the circumstance surrounding the event.
Yeah. In this case, he was so fearful, and there's a lot that we're not going to talk about here, but there's a lot in the case to back that up. He was so fearful that we used the old law enforcement adage that it didn't take 12 to do it, and 15 was too many. So he found himself in the middle till the threat was stopped, and that's what he did with it. And if it works for one group, it's going to work for another group, and that's the argument that we took. It should work. Yeah.
It should. But if you would present me as a juror with that case, the number of shots was excessive, and I would have found him guilty.
And so we come back to say, on the law enforcement side or any other side, how fast does it take for you to empty a magazine? You can empty a magazine in a couple seconds. And so it's not the number of shots.
It's
right?
The timing.
And that's what we've said all along on this other set of arguments. And so over here, it doesn't take but a couple seconds to empty a magazine. And that's one dynamic, changing, critical incident that this client is trying to get up from the couch, escape the clutches of what he thinks is about to happen while simultaneously moving to get out of a doorway.
In the room that was 8 by 8.
In a room that was really tiny, filled with furniture. You can empty a magazine
that quick,
really fast. And so that knowledge, experience, and trust comes back to say, you need to understand what's happening here so that your client has the best chance possible. And I know we touched on it, but you're thinking, man, I can't believe you would defend these guys. Yeah, that's part of the job, because it's defending that person's constitutional rights and making sure they have a fair path through the justice system. And if that was your family member, and that was your loved one, and I know it in this particular case, if that was your family member, you'd want somebody that's able to have those abilities to look at that case and review it and do the things that we did for that client. That's a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Some fun stories there. We've been threatening to do that for a long time. I'll say this. Every case is unique. They're all different. And that's the point. That's why you do the work, is to say, okay, let's look at the facts of this case. Let's look at what's happening and let the facts guide us down that particular path. So it's good work. It's fun work. It's taxing, challenging, but it's good work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else on your points?
No. No. Mine are very limited.
Well, listen, this is fun. I would imagine if I was the listener, I'd have a lot of questions and I would have some comments and some thoughts. And so we welcome those. Ask the questions. What do you want to know? What do you want to hear about? What do you have to say about those things? It's fun for us. So you'll find us on social media and you'll find the episodes there. We appreciate every follow and every like, every time you share or download the episode. So if you find this interesting, then share it with somebody. Engage with us. Tell us what you want to hear and what you want to know. And I think on future episodes, let's move into maybe some surveillance and some of the other stuff. It won't be quite as serious as murder investigations, but we've got some fun stuff to share.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. With that, we'll get out of here.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Jude the Podcast. See you. Thanks.